as we know, whilst things might happen from a macroeconomic point of view, they do still filter down to having an impact on our profits and on our pockets, primarily when it comes to the rise of the low-touch economy, where financial and digital inclusion in a pandemic world has been something that's been highlighted given what we've experienced in the last few months. As we know, the financial and digital economy has undergone a permanent shift with a digital-first mantra, touchless commerce and improved customer experience. Now, with all of this advancing so quickly, what does it mean for women's digital and financial inclusion, especially in a world with COVID-19 that has exacerbated the gender and economic inequalities? This raises a very pertinent question in terms of how best we need to understand how we serve the needs of the unbanked and underbanked, and how this can unlock significant advantages for emerging economies, specifically at this time. What new products can be developed? Can they be pandemic proof? And how do we ensure that despite the pandemic, women still remain at the forefront and continue to receive digital and financial support? Well, join me for this conversation as we get introduced to our panelists.
Ebehijie Momoh is Country Manager and Area Business Head, West Africa, Mastercard. She has held this role since December 2019. Based in Nigeria, Ebehijie is responsible for advancing the Mastercard brand presence in West Africa, deploying innovative payment solutions, and partnering with local governments and market regulators to build a world beyond cash. Ngover Ihyembe-Nwankwo is the head coverage at Rand Merchant Bank Nigeria. The coverage team fulfills the role of being the central point of contact for all RMBN's clients, which includes developing new business opportunities and overseeing the client's day-to-day corporate and investment banking requirements. Yvonne Ike is the Managing Director, Sub-Saharan Africa at the Bank of America. Yvonne has more than 25 years' experience in the financial services sector. Yvonne is passionate about actively contributing to Africa's development. In 2019, she was recognized as one of the top 100 women CEOs in Africa. The moderator is Gugulethu Mfuphi, global moderator and conversationalist.
Well, let's get this conversation on the road, especially in terms of the introductions that we've had to our panelists, Ebehijie, Ngover, as well as Yvonne, who will be joining us for this pertinent conversation in terms of understanding how it is that in this low-touch economy that we can ensure that women are not left behind when it comes to financial and digital inclusion. Now, as we know, the stats do suggest that the World Bank and over the last few years, women have disproportionately not had significant access to financing and funding opportunities, both from a personal perspective and for the development of their growth in terms of businesses and entrepreneurial desires. Specifically, the figures that have been punted around by the World Bank show a figure of around 7% in terms of a discrepancy between men and women in owning and opening bank accounts. But surely, on the back of the COVID-19 pandemic, what we've witnessed is that these particular concerns have been exacerbated and potentially left more women marginalized on the sidelines. So I guess picking up on this particular theme of the pandemic and understanding the impact it's had on many women across the continent, we need to start off by understanding the status quo. And I'm grateful because all my guests have experience within the banking fraternity. They themselves are well respected within the roles that they serve and can offer us guidelines in terms of their observations from their roles and in their personal capacities and exposure that they have to the continent in terms of understanding the reality. Welcome to all of you ladies, and thank you so much for joining us. Happy International Women's Day. But as we get into this very critical and pertinent topic, Ebehijie, I think I'd like to start off with you just to set the theme in terms of really getting to grasp the status quo and understanding and fully comprehending the impact that COVID-19 and this pandemic with the subsequent lockdowns has actually had on the disparities in women accessing financing adequately. Ebehijie?
Thank you so much. Happy International Women's Day to everyone. And thank you for having me here. First of all, say thank you to the organizers of the Forbes Women African Leading Women Summit. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much. Yeah, the pandemic, the topic is everywhere, and the impact have been significant on women. But first, let's look at the woman itself today is a catalyst for growth. It's a catalyst for innovation and for social change. So when we address socioeconomic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the women and the girls, let's not forget the girls, is a key to economic recovery, because it's only by including everyone that we can effect a sustainable, inclusive growth where everyone can thrive. At Mastercard, we partner and then we partner with partners, and then we also innovate to include and connect women to the possibilities and the opportunities that will enable them make a living, following their passion, not just working, but following their passion, and also to contribute collectively to our prosperity. So Mastercard do believe in collaboration, and we also believe that collaboration will serve as an agent of change in contributing towards the digital financial inclusion. And so therefore, we continue to partner across the continent with fintechs, and then applying our technology expertise and wide network to promote digital transformation. Now back to the COVID-19 and the impact that it has had on women and also financial inclusion. First of all, just like what you said at the beginning, the progress in addressing the global gender disparity in financial inclusion remained slow. The gap is 7%. That was the data that we have in 2011. But when you bring it back home, here in the Middle East and Africa, economies such as Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, Angola, the gender gap in women financial inclusion is as large as 40%. Today, around 20 to 30% of the females have a bank account that can grant them even the freedom or the flexibility to manage their finances. What are we saying? 25% qualify for a credit card. So in this current context of a pandemic, disparity in women financial inclusion have significant implication, not only for women business owners, because sometimes there's a tendency to think about just the women business owner, but for women business leaders, women like us, professionals, technical workers, employees, those that are enrolled in tertiary institutions as well. So with most businesses and institutions around the world are now transitioning to the virtual world of working and living, women who do not have bank accounts or credit cards are finding themselves in a predicament. Today, we hear that the governments are giving out access to cash, but these cash or relief payments are provided through bank accounts. Mm-hmm. So where would the money go to? So even when we look at other women business owners, they are looking for loans to pay their worker salaries, to boost maybe their rental payments. The challenges of even the lower credit scores due to low salary or even the credit standing of women disqualify them automatically altogether from obtaining loans. So, but the good news is that the digital financial inclusion was already a development focus area for everyone before the pandemic hit. Yeah, and now it's imperative for most COVID-19 recovery. Yes, there are challenges, like I have just stated, to accelerating digital finance, but also increasingly there is understanding and how to overcome some of these obstacles and then also reduce risk. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that feedback, Ebehijie. And I'm hearing the stats that you've quoted, 40% in terms of women in the unbanked market certainly is a number that is quite frightening and one that does need to be addressed. Yvonne, I'd like to come to you to get your thoughts and perspective on this particular topic, especially in terms of understanding the legacy issues and the weaknesses that have been highlighted by the pandemic as to how these hindrances might continue to be with us if we don't necessarily address female financial inclusion adequately. What have your observations been regarding the impact of the pandemic on the continent and failure to address these adequately going forward? Yvonne, I think we're going to potentially use the 2020 quote that many of us have gotten used to, that your mic is on mute.
It's mute.
So I've unmuted my mic. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's a great pleasure to be here on this very auspicious day. At Bank of America, we're very, very focused on supporting women entrepreneurs across the world. And some of the initiatives that we support in Africa is the Acumen program, which is for male and female entrepreneurs. But we're working with Acumen to support the 3,000 jobs in the next 2 to 3 years. We also support the Prince's Trust Inclusive Business Growth Initiative. We have the Global Ambassadors Program, which has a big Africa component to it. And also the Bank of America has an Institute of Women Entrepreneurship, which is it's contributed to the University of Cornell Institute of Women Entrepreneurship, but we've just contributed another 30,000 seats. A lot of those facilities are online. And so we're passionate about advancing the cause of women. Just to answer your question, which I think is very important, I think the first thing I want to do is put some context around this. So even before the pandemic, we've seen that SMEs in Africa contribute at least 50% across Africa to the GDP and more than 70% to employment. And women run businesses in there are about 60%. Now, those businesses tend to be at the lower end of the value chain and the types of businesses that did suffer more during the pandemic. And one of the things, and then we then say, okay, what over the last 10 years, what has happened? What we have seen, though, is that digital financial services has been on the up and rise in Africa. And we've gone from 23 to 43% in terms of active mobile bank accounts. So that progression is there. But then if we look at the data, the facts that lie beneath that, women have less access to those mobile accounts. And also they have less financial solutions that are relevant for them. And so we see a world where it's imperative that actually to address financial inclusion, there must be we must see more digital transformation to help with that. And I look at the commercial banks today as a vehicle for supporting financial inclusion, particularly of women. And I see, frankly, a less relevant role to play in terms of the type of financing structures they have, the type of ancillary requirements they have, like collateral and all those sort of things, and contrast that with an emerging economy where we have digital banking platforms now that are more targeted to those lower income companies and SMEs, really, a lot of whom are women, and they're very focused on financial inclusion products for them to bring them into the economy. And so I see that as one of the things that we must look forward to and support as we go forward on this journey.
Thank you so much for that, Yvonne. I'm hearing the digital connection, and that's certainly one that we'll delve into in just a moment, specifically given even our interaction on this platform here today, right? Ordinarily, we'd all be gathered in one particular conference hall, shaking hands and engaging. But given the world that we live in, it's quite evident that digital is the future. And the African continent has been able to ride that wave in terms of digital tools, as you've mentioned, to increase access to financial services offerings. I'm intrigued to actually hear the feedback as well that we'll hear from Ngover to get more insight in terms of the partnership of the bank and the view of digital technology and finance interlinking is certainly a trend that we've witnessed over the last few years. And Ngover, perhaps if you could join us in this conversation to elaborate on your observations as to how leveraging on digital opportunities can be an opportunity for us to exploit to enhance the access that women have to financial services products.
Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you very much for having me. So I think, the first one needs to sort of set the context around where we are and why digital is the way to go. So in a country, for example, like Nigeria, where I am, and I use that to extrapolate for most of sub-Saharan Africa, you find that women are disproportionately excluded. One, because they're generally earning less. So when you try to do a comparison and you're trying to offer credit, in many cases, women just don't quite qualify. You also find that a lot of the roles that women are involved in, as I think it was Yvonne that alluded to earlier, is really at the micro level. And so what then happens is they're not a natural focus for financial institutions. And that's where the conversation around digital inclusion has been held and has been pushed for many years. Sadly, COVID hit. And what we found with COVID as well is that women were disproportionately affected because women shared the higher burden of care. And so women are usually having to choose between the family and home, and with many children either completely out of school or working from home, you find that women do need to sort of have to make a choice. So what we found is an even bigger imperative for banks and financial institutions to sit back and say, how do we intervene? And in what way can we leapfrog some of the challenges? And some of the things that I'm certainly seeing is a focusing on the fintechs and understanding from the fintechs that it's not only smartphone-enabled devices that one can use to access technology. So I'm finding that fintechs are in a way scaling down the solutions that they're providing and finding ways to work with traditional organizations. So one thing I find in many, many countries is there's always been sort of a cooperative that takes note of what women do, helps to save money, helps to lend money. And so we're finding that fintechs are, scaling down to understand how that works and really finding ways to provide access to banking, first of all, through working with those cooperatives, educating women, providing devices where it needs to be, and providing cheaper source of funding to allow women to then, come into the sector. The other thing that that we're seeing certainly is that banks are realizing that it makes good business to lend to a woman. So we also see that there's been issues on the supply side of financing for women, where institutions have historically demanded for collateral, where property rights in Africa, in many countries in Africa, doesn't actually allow women to own land or own properties. So we're finding that banks are beginning to say, look, if we can discount some of the traditional requirements that we have, do we then allow ourselves to bank a sector where historically women pay back their loans? They're actually excellent credit, and that they run good business. And so there's a lot of work being done, and the banking sector and the financial sector is coming along with the help of many central banks as well.
I'd like to stay with you for a moment there, Ngover, and perhaps dig deeper into this particular conversation, because one thing that is clear is that the three of you as panelists do work for multinational organizations, and corporate clients are essentially the individuals that you serve. But I'm intrigued to also understand that given the many hats that each of you wear on this panel, you do have insight that you can share with us in terms of the development from a grassroots level. And as you've alluded to, it's at the micro level, the SMMEs, the entrepreneurs who are at the coalface of experiencing these lockdowns and the vastness and harshness of the pandemic, who are the individuals who are most at need. Perhaps give us some clarity in terms of the multiple hats that you wear in your view on women entrepreneurship, and how it is that even multinationals looking to collaborate with new fintech institutions really do drive a need to support the woman at the lower scale of entrepreneurship across the continent. Ngover?
So thanks for the question on the multiple hats. Sometimes I'm not quite sure which hat I'm wearing today. So I say that my day job is investment banking. I've worked in banking now for 21 plus years. And my other job is working for an organization called WIMBIZ, where I've been volunteering for many years, but I currently sit as the chairperson. And what WIMBIZ does is to push for women in leadership. Now, as part of that role, it gives me a unique insight into the challenges that women in management, business, and public service face in their leadership journeys. It also gives insight into some of the sort of discriminatory practices that we find happening that has hindered growth. And so working then in the financial sector, I'm able to sort of be a bridge and link one to the other. Now, what I'm finding, certainly with RMB as part of the first round group, is understanding that we can impact in many interesting ways. So I say this, for example, that we've got a private equity firm. We also, as First Round, have a number of individual businesses. Now, as an investment bank, typically the micro level, small scale woman is not a target market. However, there are lots of interesting businesses that we're now finding that we can support, either providing equity or providing debt that allows them to unlend into some of these segments. Also working with our clients and helping them to understand how they can intentionally create sustainability in their supply chains by infusing policies that specifically focus on women, making sure that women make a proportion of suppliers into the business. and that they're creating an enabling environment. The last thing I'll talk about is about incubating businesses. So a lot of capacity building, educating, encouraging employees of the bank like myself to volunteer for organizations that I talked about, but also encouraging us to teach, to learn, and to support businesses by providing pro bono services, helping them to do their accounting, understanding what it means to put a credit application in place, understanding what it means to get yourselves prepared. And also the one thing is people often think debt, I always say debt is the only solution to growing a business. Helping us to impact by showing people what financial knowledge really is and showing, the equity and the debt and helping them to understand the interplay between the two and ultimately helping them become more successful.
Thank you so much for that. And I guess a very clear mandate in terms of understanding that there's additional support that needs to be provided to these entrepreneurs and creating and sourcing these products that will work for them in terms of catering for their unique needs. Yvonne, I'd like to throw this back to you as well, being aware as well that you wear multiple hats and serve in a variety of roles in terms of clearly getting an understanding of the grassroots impact of financial inclusion on the continent. Share with us, and I guess building up on the feedback that's been shared by Ngover, as to moving forward in this pandemic world, on the back of the observations you found through your own foundation, on the back of the feedback that Ngover has also provided, and in understanding the lay of the landscape, if we had to create products that were pandemic proof and future female focused, what would those tools look like and what would they incorporate to address the needs that you witness on a grassroots level? Yvonne?
Thank you so much. At the grassroots level for women, the biggest problem that they have really is just access to finance. And what I mean by that is any manner in which they can pay for things that they have, or even access to other products like investment products, saving products, and then later on as they get more money, insurance products. So the biggest thing the biggest need for them is actually to make available more relevant products for mass market. And until we address women in the mass market, only when we address women in the mass market do we actually then really begin to create proper social economic change that will fuel economic growth for the long term. So that mass market, those mass market products, some of the things we must have is concessionary financing. I mentioned earlier about digital banking. So Ngover talked about the need for collateral and banks adapting. Really honestly, the commercial banks are just not adapting as fast as we need them to. So what we do need is more digital solutions that are data and data analytics driven, that speak to some of the things that Ngover mentioned. Women are good borrowers. Women do pay. So working with data analytics that focuses on the attitude to lending and data analytics that better understands the underlying business without a view to previous credit card histories or ownership of land or any of those frankly irrelevant contributors to what is needed is important. I do think that investment in research on what the needs are. For example, in that world, people are looking for their daily bread. People are looking for money that they can earn every day and deploy every day. So looking for models around that. And I do think that governments, corporates, and also international organizations that actually want to make a real impact in Africa should be contributing to that research so we better understand the solutions that we can bring to the table. And then one other thing that I would see is, because over the lockdown, one of the initiatives I tried to do with my foundation is see how we could take large amounts of money that do exist internationally that can support women entrepreneurs and actually small businesses in Africa. And what I found to my despair is there aren't enough transparent tools for actually enabling those large organizations to deploy those monies into the financial system in the continent. So even if they came through commercial banks, how does that money get to the SMEs, the women? How do you then track what they do with it? And how do you follow on to see which SMEs you're lending to that will further employment, will further economic growth, and operate in the real sectors? So that investing in that transparency is mission critical for the success that we can have in the future in Africa. Those are some of the points that I would say for now and stop there at this point.
Thanks so much, Yvonne. I love the passion that's coming through, and I think it is quite pertinent that we delve into these areas of understanding given the lay of the landscape. I do understand that we are fairly limited for time, so perhaps, Ebehijie, you'll close this off for us. And I think we've managed to understand the lay of the landscape. We've completely gotten to understand the role and the impact on the grassroots level as to what is required and how it is that large institutions, governments, and additional stakeholders, including entrepreneurs, can actually drive change. But I'm aware, Ebehijie, that Mastercard has also tried to upskill the future generation. So whilst you and I and people like yourself in your respective roles are actually looking to change policies, to change how it is that corporates operate, we also need to ensure that we invest in a future generation that is digitally upskilled and that is financially educated and financially literate. Give us some insight from a Mastercard point of view as to what some of the initiatives are that you've driven in terms of investing in the skills development perspective to ensure that a future generation of females will be digitally and financially included.
Thank you so much. First of all, last year we made a global financial inclusion commitment to bring 1 billion people into the digital economy by 2025. I'd like to let you know that 50 million of these are small businesses, and with direct focus on 25 million women entrepreneurs, just to state that as the beginning. But you said something really critical that I'd like to sort of quickly share what we have done in the past couple in addressing some of the skills gap that we have seen even in financial inclusion. First of all, Mastercard will partner with the Junior Achievement Nigeria to help bridge that digital and financial literacy gap among school students and young adults in Nigeria. We have now the JAN is a series of programs that we have developed to equip participating students with essential skill to prepare them for the future. Successes as digital entrepreneurs based on what we have said. Now, JAN is a part of the Junior Achievement Worldwide. That's the world's oldest and largest non-profit economic organization. And so we have been able to partner with them to do this skill. Now, the very interesting one that I'd like to talk about is the Girls for Tech program. I'm very excited about it. Having been a mother of 3 girls, I can imagine what the younger generation are getting from this skill set initiative that we have. Now we know that to bridge the tech skills shortage through the Girls for Tech, it's called the Girls for Tech. That's our program that we have been able to provide digital skills to girls aged between 8 and 12 years old as part of our inquiry-based STEM. You know what STEM is? The science, technology, engineering, and math activity. Now the Girls for Tech inspire young girls to build their skills that they need in STEM to become problem solver, because that's so important for us as women and even as young girls, and then as the leaders of tomorrow. It also aims to ensure that women have a voice in the development of products. You know, when Yvonne was talking about products earlier, and then also Ngover, the question is that where is the impact of a woman in developing that product? So through these skills, we're able to train young girls that are able to have a voice when it comes to developing products for the future. The program incorporates a very deep expertise in payment technology and innovation as well, and then include topics such as algorithm, digital convergence, cryptology. You know, we've talked about cryptocurrency all over. These are, you know, this is a great initiative which we are having with through the Girls for Tech. Mastercard has reached more than 1 million girls in 32 countries via 14 languages since we started this Girls for Tech. We launched globally in 2014. So I'm very excited. Last year, we have committed to reaching 5 million girls globally by 2025. I'm looking forward to us achieving that. And as a part of this program that we are having, International Women's Day, we actually hosted 160 girls between the ages of 8 and 12 to our Girls for Tech webinar with our Junior Achievers Nigeria. I look forward to receiving some of the young girls there. The webinar will be rolled over on the 11th, on the 18th, as well as the 25th of March.
Sure.
Thank you.
Ebehijie, I love the excitement, and I think it's just when we were starting to get the conversation going with everyone on the panel, we've realized that we've found ourselves under significant time pressures. But clearly, the information that we're sharing here today is that we understand the reality of the landscape, that there's significant pressures in terms of females having access to financing across the continent. There are some engagements that have taken place between various stakeholders to shift the narrative, but we are finding that corporates, together with leaders within these spaces, are actually looking to shift that narrative by engaging, using technology, using digital tools and skills as an enabler to actually ensure that we access the necessary skills gap to enhance the development of small and medium enterprises who, as we know, are the cornerstone of our economic performance. To my panelists, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate the feedback and certainly look forward to how we translate this conversation into action in future years and months to come. A big thank you to Yvonne, Ngover and Ebehijie for joining us today for this particular conversation. We look forward to continuing this offline through the various social media platforms, given the insight that we've gained.